Debuting back in the days of Medarot DS, this French doll type stands kind of as a testament to the game and generation's rather unique art style and design style. It is DOL00 Olympia, with a kit of Flash, Double Beam, Float Legs, and the leg ability of Illusion, which grants the stealth effect to self when charging Metaforce. Now, as a model available in Medarot S's permanent banners, Olympia is one of those many models that will grace a lot of your gacha pulls, or grief them depending on how you see it, a very large number of times as you're pulling for pretty much any other model, be that a limited pickup or a collab. So chances are, if you've been playing longer than, say, a week, you probably would have already collected at least one part to this rather strange antique doll type, and you're probably looking at it wondering, what do you do and why are you here? Well, you're most certainly not wrong with its unique design, but this strange doll type does actually house some pretty nasty power if used correctly. Flash, and its only melee skill in its kit, is an ailment-based skill that I essentially like to call Deathlock Light to a point, primarily for that if you are able to successfully catch a foe in heat phase, as in you are able to outrun them, it does effectively work like Bug or Virus, where it effectively will make them waste their turn and force them to turn around right where they begin. In addition, while they are still recovering from that, which is basically the duration of their cool phase and their next heat phase running up to the line, they are also slapped with no dodge and no defend the entire time, which guarantees any hits that land are going to be immensely painful as guaranteed critical hits. And on top of that, all hits are going to land anyway because of no dodge. So it's going to be basically a free nuke during the duration of that penalty. Right and left arm of Beam are optic attribute attacks, which means they will get a ×2 damage bonus at 30% charge, and a ×3 damage bonus at 100% charge. The only real thing that stands Beam out from Laser or Hyper Beam is the fact that it is incapable of pierce damage, even if it does have the higher damage outputs. So, compared to most other optic attribute skills, this one may have the highest possible damage output, minus of course Beam Sword or Hyper Beam, but it is also best used for spot nuking or spot punish if you can keep that damage up and guarantee the hit's going to land. So you'll still have the power, but you certainly won't have any of the carryover damage, and if you break something that's already close to broken, you effectively kind of waste that turn, unfortunately. Float Legs means that Olympia will have relatively solid coverage across most terrains at A rank across the board, minus of course S rank on Cyber, which everybody gets, and the Illusion leg ability is a rather strange but also weirdly fitting design for Olympia, as it does mean that once that stealth effect is applied to herself, it does allow her to be untouchable for her next turn, unless she's already being targeted, and it allows her to bypass any pesky shields that might be in play to intercept attacks. In terms of armor, Olympia is actually relatively tanky across the board, which is, given her design with those very large music box-like contraptions on her arms, is kind of to be expected. Head HP is about 3550, arms about 3100 each, and the legs at 3550 as well means she has a relatively solid and moderately tanky HP pool, so not super difficult to take down, but she will definitely take a hit or two before she does end up kicking the bucket. When it comes to her leg stats, she is packing a very nice 720 for her base mobility at 5-star, so definitely one of the higher tier leg types if I'm being completely honest, and most certainly worth raising just to have on hand, especially given that it can also support up to 2 heavy parts, which both of its arms are. Its evade of 1024 isn't too shabby either, as this does mean she will have a relatively decent time dodging or grazing attacks, but a melee resist of 646 and a shoot resist of 884 are definitely, how do I put this nicely, not great. This does mean she will take a very significant amount of increased damage from melee fighters that get up close and personal in her space, and even taking pot shots from afar will take this anti-doll type out pretty quickly if she doesn't pay attention to where it's coming from and put an end to it. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate Olympia a pretty solid 5 out of 10, kind of a middle-of-the-road type of bot, one of those models where it never hurts to have them raised just in case you need them, but don't expect a lot of game-changing effects from this model either. Flash may be super handy, and the illusion leg ability on her legs will also certainly come in handy in some places, but given that Beam is incapable of pierce damage and it's a Metaforce reliant part for its damage bonus, Olympia is going to take a lot of time getting up to speed before she actually deals anything lasting or anything considerable when it comes to base damage. And even though Flash can be very useful, given that it's a head skill, it does limit the amount of times she can spam it. As mixed parts, I do have to rate her just a little bit higher at about a 5.5 out of 10, and depending on the situation, arguments could even be made for a 6.5 in some cases, primarily for her head and the ability of Flash. Now, in current competitive meta and PvP, Flash is something that you generally will almost never ever not see, especially when paired with a skill such as Sujigiri, given that Flash will force the enemy to turn around and start their cooldown phase, and Sujigiri basically punishes the foe for showing them their back. So this is also a very incredibly useful and competitive meta part that you can essentially use pretty much anywhere as an ailment you generally can't ever go wrong with fitting. Just of course, make sure and exercise caution if the enemy is using stat cleanse, as it does mean that any attempt to flash the enemy or catch them with their back turned may perhaps come in an end up defeat and effective waste of time.